Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Antoni Cimolino. I'm the Artistic Director of the Stratford Festival of Canada and the Director of the production of Hamlet, which you're going to see tonight as part of our Stratford Festival on Film series. And I have with me two extraordinary actors, both of them Hamlets. One, Jonathan Goad, who is the Hamlet that you're going to see tonight from our 2015 production, and the other is Amaka Umeh, who was to have been the Hamlet in our 2020 production of that play, which was interrupted by the pandemic. But she will be a Hamlet at the Stratford Festival sometime soon. Amaka and Jonathan, hello.
Hi.
Hey. Hi.
Hey.
It's great to see you both. And it's great to be talking this enigmatic, magical play. I mean, it's a bit of everything, isn't it? It's a ghost story, it's a revenge tragedy, it's a domestic drama. It revolves around revenging the murder of a father and takes place in the centers of power in Denmark. When we start seeing the story of Hamlet, where is Hamlet at, either of you? How does Hamlet begin this journey?
I think you can generally say, and I think I'll find myself saying that a lot in our discussion here, that in many ways Hamlet is such a personal journey that it's not really up to me where Hamlet begins the story for any other Hamlet other than myself. But I think you could probably generally say that Hamlet is in some form of grief, maybe even in the throes of the deepest, well, I shouldn't say the deepest, but the initial deepest form of grief, where he has lost a father, clearly a father that meant as much as a father can mean to you. And that he is in that place of, he's not in denial, but he's certainly in the place where he has not accepted the death. He is mystified and horrified and stupefied and nullified by the weight of the grief. And of course, the subsequent marriage of his mother to his uncle, which compounds the problem. But more than anything, I think he's in a place of utter despair.
Amaka, as you were beginning rehearsals, what was it like to explore the top of Hamlet's journey, where Hamlet's at?
A big task, for sure. I think Shakespeare is really generous in leaving clues inside the text, kind of creating that immediacy of intention, from the very first word. We meet Hamlet with a great deal of sadness, like Jonathan has mentioned, but also there's some humor there. He starts, his first line is a pun, and the first soliloquy starts with a description of wanting to melt. So that for me was a bit of insight into just a stiffness or maybe even a numbness, a coldness that one was desperate to break out from. The words begin to tumble out, and we see that it's about the death of a father, and it's about the betrayal by a mother and uncle whose influence just comes in quite a sharp and harsh way. So yeah, I'm really thankful to have had Graham and Mev in those roles, because they're so generous, they're so insightful, and really allowed for a lot of play within that.
Yeah, it only occurs to me now that you're, sorry, I was just going to say that now that you said that, it's funny too that in many ways Hamlet, until the moment of his father's death, it's arguable he was living an idyllic life, he's the son of a king, he's a prince, the world is in front of him, he's in love with an extraordinary young, beautiful woman. He's been at school and he clearly thrives on learning and thrives on the possibility of life. And then this happens. And shortly thereafter, his mother seems to, in his own mind, deeply betray the love that had been there before. And so he's completely unprepared and ill-prepared for life, doing a complete about turn. And so in many ways, it occurred to me when Amaka was saying, wanting to just melt. I think we can all relate to that on some level. Sometimes the pain is trivial. Maybe it's your first broken heart in high school or whatever that is, but where we feel, we're not necessarily suicidal, but we do feel like melting into a dew would be a much preferred alternative to the pain I feel.
To disappearing, yeah, and evaporating.
So,
It's almost a nice like mirror for the role itself, for like an actor taking on this iconic role. You know, I'm sure
Yeah,
you
right.
have those moments, you
Yeah,
know, where
right.
it's like, I just want to be
In this
vapor.
rehearsal, I want to
Yeah,
I want to turn into water. Yeah.
yeah,
why
exactly.
is everybody looking at me, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it starts at full pitch. I mean, very full of emotion. When the ghost, and so central to the story, is figuring out whether the ghost is in fact the ghost of your father or is a devil sent to drag your soul to hell. The ghost tells you that your uncle did it. And the first reaction that Hamlet has is, oh, my prophetic soul. So how much of that sense was there for both of you that there's something wrong, that
The ghost. What is a ghost? What is a ghost? What is like the ghost of your father? You know, that's such a powerful image, and I think Hamlet, like you say, is a prince and very much an icon in his own right, but has these big shoes to fill, and I think that is part of why this message comes manifest through the form of his father, his dead father, to give him this information. And yeah, like you say, he doesn't know. He has doubts about whether or not this is a good spirit or a bad one. And so the rest of the play, we are watching him trying to figure it out.
well, some people wouldn't bother, right? A Laertes, you get the sense, would just jump in and stab someone right
Oh,
away.
yeah.
Right.
But Hamlet's trying to figure it out, and this strategy of trying to pretend that you're mad, at least it seems to be a strategy at the beginning, but over time, by the time he leaves the scene with Ophelia, she's convinced he's lost his reason. So what is that journey between pretended madness to beginning to actually lose it?
I think he already knows that using an antic disposition may be of an advantage to him in the task that has just been set before him, which he has no idea how to achieve. But the one thing he does know is he's going to need tools. And one of the tools is, if I can keep people at bay through any number of things, whatever it is, I will need those tools. And of course, feigned madness or some form of madness can be, there's an empowerment to that. And I think he also feels quite a little bit crazed. But to go back to what I was going to say, I feel strongly that there's not a lick of madness in Hamlet. Not a lick for me.
Yeah.
I mean, by all means, grief is its own form of madness. High emotional states, profound disappointment, which I think was a powerful sort of river in my Hamlet world. But I think he's the sanest human on the planet. And that's why the world around him is so mad. But like he says to his mother when he confronts his mother finally and says, "Don't." I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he says something along the lines of, "Don't try to put madness upon me. Don't say that this is my madness. You're just not looking at the world. You're not looking at what's right in front of you." So I felt strongly that he uses madness as a tool.
Amaka, how mad did you become in your process?
Yeah, we of course had to tackle this madness question. It's so interesting. What is madness? There's also the Elizabethan relationship to mental illness, and obviously now we're in a very different time. Isn't spying on somebody just as crazy of a thing to do? Isn't killing your brother and marrying his wife also mad? Hamlet uses it as a tool, like John says. It's almost a way of subverting authority, and of tapping into his own sovereignty. He's not being taken seriously to begin with. People think he's just acting super sad. So he says, okay, since we're already in this world, since we already have this seed planted, why not water it a little bit? And I think in a way he uses it as a control in the experiment on his own mind. I mean, his father says, "Tame not your mind," and then he goes ahead and does just that. But I don't know. I don't know if that's just him being a reckless kid. But I think it's a control in the experiment, because if he can always be alert to when he's faking it, then he can know for himself for sure when it's real, when the visions are not his own conjuring. At least that's what he posits. That experiment goes awry, of course, but
well, there's, of course, Rosencrantz Guild certain talk about he's putting on a crafty madness. But then later on with Ophelia, she talks about his reason being jangled and, oh, what a noble mind is here overthrown. So if he's pretending, he's starting to be very convincing.
Yeah.
Yeah, or he's getting caught up, I think we all kind of have our own versions of performance. Not to say that everyone is fake, but I think we all have our own versions of roles that we play and dispositions that we put on in our daily life. So we can be very convincing when we are practiced and when we repeat a thing. But I really love what you said, Jonathan. This is grief is its own form of madness. So,
and there's a performative element to this, as you say. There's as an action that a man might play, and so the players arrive. What was that like for you two? The arrival of the players.
So jolly. I love that. It's in a way like an intermission inside the play.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the arrival of the players does offer a little bit of reprieve from a certain kind of heaviness to his soul. I think that he feels in common company. He feels kinship with them, and possibly more kinship with them than he would with other factions of royalty. But that said, sometimes it can be misleading that that Hamlet is, if only he had been an actor, or if only he had been allowed to go and join the circus. And one, I don't know that in the end he would have handled the life of a traveling performer particularly well. And I also think that it should never divert from the fact that the sort of notion that's sometimes been played in Hamlet's that he's ill-equipped for the role of prince, and for that matter, for the role of leadership and king. I think nothing could be further from the truth. I think Hamlet, and Ophelia for that matter, are exceptional human beings, and they represent possibility in the future. And so the notion that, they just were, somehow they should have been poet lover artists or something, as opposed to people of influence and leaders, never really rang true for me. I think he's the kind of leader we should seek out everywhere in this world. One that has a sensitive soul, cares deeply about people, has a fierce mind and an excitement and a lust for beauty and life and love. What happens to him through the offense of the uncle is that the possibility, the promise of the future, is essentially extinguished in one grotesque act of violence, and by the sociopath. So anyway, I'll have to say that I think that the players arriving is, for Hamlet, there's something like, they are the people, they are his people, not unlike Hal loving the company of Falstaff and Eastcheap. That sort of, there's something about the rootedness of those people, the truth that lives in actors who are scratching at a living by going town to town and performing, that he relates to. He hungers for that sort of the spirit of life.
And in the music, these particular players in our production, you had the sense, set as it was just before the Second World War, that these traveling players are marginal characters. The klezmer music that's being played has them be, almost hunted. The play, though, seems to give Hamlet the conviction that his uncle has guilt on his hands. And then you confront your mother. Amaka, I'm curious, as an actress tackling this part, what was that like, the interaction with your Gertrude and the discoveries that you made there in that very important scene with the Gertrude?
First of all, a Nigerian child would never speak to their parents like that. Definitely not the mother, because you get sent into another dimension with that kind of rudeness. Anyway, and I mean, of course, it's not nice at all. But if coming to this part with my whole self, I was like, oh, there's no way. I can't even dream this. It's not possible. And so I found it really tough. But I think the hook in eventually was that Hamlet feels really alone as far as having lost all family. There's no one left. She is the last resort. She's his mother, you know. And so it's very much a yearning, a longing to be believed, to get an apology for that betrayal, or even just an admittance of a neglected responsibility, to that relationship between child and parent. And I still to this day, every time I look at that scene, I just go, oh, I don't want to do this. But I think I think it's great that we actually get to hear from Gertrude as much as we do, and we get to see them together for what is basically that's their only chance in the whole adventure. And yeah, thankfully Mev is so loving as a partner, and she really she was really very patient with me. Yeah, it's tough for anyone, I would imagine, but it's just a very human moment. We get to see Hamlet wrestle that or toe that line between man and child or adult.
Jonathan, Amaka mentioned Mav Beatty, who plays Gertrude in the production that we were working on this year, and you were working with Shauna McKenna, who you've worked with many times before. How difficult was that scene?
I felt it is the turning point in the play in many ways, because he has come off the high of discovering what he was suspecting he would discover, but he now believes he has unquestionable truth about the nature of his father's death. And so in many ways, I think he's in a fury, in a rage, and also in a sort of ecstasy of the I gotcha moment. But at the same time, there's a generosity to go into a room, even though he's on the attack. I think he does want to see her exonerated of any knowing. And I mean, I'm not sure where we fell in our production. I don't recall. In many ways, it's not my business to know. I played whatever Shauna was giving me. But even if she maybe knew somewhere deep in her soul that the man that she has married quickly after her husband's death is not what he appears to be, that some part of her really didn't know. And so I think Hamlet, to a certain extent, needs to know, what did she know? And even if she didn't know anything, how could you be so blind, or any of those sorts of things? But I think he comes there actually he comes there to do what he's wanted to do since their father's death, which is ultimately end up in her lap, holding her in grief. That's what a kid needs, that's what most kids need, no matter how old they are, no matter how capable they seem of surviving disaster. They need their parents in those brutal moments. I mean, I can even say this, in our quarantine, that, I lost my mom a couple of years ago, and I've missed her every single day since her passing. But there's a different kind of missing through this quarantine. One, I want to be able to take care of her, and I just want to talk to her more than ever. And I think there's something about that. Remember, this is a month. She married Claudius a month. So I don't even know. And it's possible that Hamlet and she didn't even exchange more than a hug. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like he goes there. And of course, it's the killing of Polonius, which is an act of, which I think sort of relates to our earlier question of whether Hamlet's mad or not. If Hamlet has a tragic flaw, for me, his tragic flaw is not a lack of action. He suffers from far too much action. And it's most definitively shown. One, after he discovers, almost certainly, Claudius the king is guilty of what he's guilty of, and he can't contain his excitement. He is so fired up. And then, of course, in the stabbing or killing, in our case, it was a gunshot, of Polonius. He is far too impulsive. If anything, he's utterly composed of action.
And like in Romeo and Juliet, the lack of time, even though months go by and he's trying to think through it, when it comes down to it, he turns into a killing machine and starts acting before he's actually thinking.
Right.
Amaka, as he gets deeper and deeper into blood, what for you was the change that happened there going into Act 5? Like, as you were, I don't know how far into it you had gotten at that point, but what were you feeling about the nature of the tragedy, how Hamlet's forced to change?
We were just about to get to it. So kind of a chaotic all around, inside and out. Yeah, it's a sea change. It's a huge change. He's, you know, met death kind of and escaped it. So that brings about a certain kind of power. I think a certain agency. At the same time, a feeling of surrender, I think, is the sort of the balance that I was interested in, or the opposites that I was interested in, because he, comes back and tells all to Horatio, yet at the same time feels very open to whatever may happen. Having defended himself against an unfair and unjust attempt on his life, he goes, I'm all in, whatever happens, happens. I'm just going to be ready for what comes. That's a very, powerful sort of place to be in, but you still don't know what's going to happen. That fencing match comes in and seems like an offer of goodwill, maybe, possibly. What's the worst that could come of it? He does say, you would not know how ill all's here about my heart. So there is that intuition still growing, still having blossomed in the time away from Elsinore. Oh, and we come back, through the graveyard. So there is the perfect, somebody who's seen death and is on the side of life and is just, meditating on what comes next.
And that gravedigger began his job as a gravedigger the day that Hamlet was born.
Right.
So, the line, we are born to die. The relationship to the open grave, which begins and ends this production, that idea of a gaping hole that's waiting for all of us. Mm-hmm. And how do we spend our time between here and there? How are we allowed to spend our time? I mean, this is a young person with so much hope, and they meet so much corruption in the world. I want to ask you, just in closing, both of you, Amaka, you are deep into rehearsals. Jonathan, you managed to do a run of this, and one day, Amaka, you'll have that feeling too. How has the work so far changed you? What has it done? What has Hamlet brought to you both?
Wow. An appreciation for this craft. So hard. There's not a day that I wasn't so challenged and incredibly frustrated. But also, this is a role like this, someone who's so introspective and curious about the world, you kind of have to give over to that experiment. I don't think there's anything that prepares a person to do this other than practice, repetition, hard work. Obviously, reimagine my place in this world. Being invited to an institution like the Stratford Festival is a major honor for which I'm eternally grateful. Despite the circumstances, this is the chance of a lifetime. So I'm stoked. I'm thrilled. And now I have, another year and some change, who knows how long, to get ready, so great. What a gift. Just a real appreciation for this, the myriad possibilities that are available to us through this incredible medium, which I love. So thank you.
Thank you. Johnny, what did you take away from all that?
Yeah, I guess, you end up meditating on a lot of things when it comes to Hamlet, and that meditation never ceases. As the play is a haunting, the play is a ghost story, at least in one facet, and one might argue it's primarily a ghost story and a revenge story. I constantly feel haunted, not necessarily in a bad way, by Hamlet. And I think that's ultimately because it's one reason I think the play lives in this sort of infamy that it does is because it is probably our finest, richest, and deepest treatise on death. It is a death play, but not necessarily that it is a play without, that sounds depressing. And death can be depressing, but more so that it's an examination. Holding the skull up is looking death in the face and asking the question, who's there? What is a life? What is a good life? I began to feel as we got into closer to sort of the run of the play, that Hamlet is in grief through the entire play, but he's in grief for himself, because when he says, the time is out of joint, oh cursed spite that ever I was born to set it right, I feel like, again, his prophetic soul is speaking. He knows that no matter how this plays out, and there's a myriad of ways it may play out, in seeking to do what is being asked of him, his own death is encapsulated in that. And so in many ways, he's grieving for his own life. And he continues to do that. Now, what changes in that moment where, and I think it's wrapped entirely in the death of love for him, he has to, in effect, kill love. He has to kill Ophelia. And you could, make a pretty strong argument for the fact that she dies due to his actions. He kills the man that fathered her. The man that loves her kills the man who loved her, and puts her in an impossible situation. And as you know, in our production, it may be a secret to some people, but not to you, that our Ophelia was pregnant. And so, in fact, he kills not only their future, but the future in killing Ophelia. And I think to exact what he has to do, he has to kill love. He has to become, it takes a tyrant to defeat a tyrant. And so by the time you get to the end of the play, he has accepted destiny. It is not the destiny he was born for, or arguably not the destiny he thought he was born for. It's not the destiny he deserves, but it's the destiny that he has accepted. And so in a way, for me, because it is about seismic philosophical questions like that, it permeates all of my thinking, from that moment on. And that's just what that is. And that is a gift, to be affected by a piece of art like that. But it is, that's what art in its sort of highest form, maybe highest calling, is to do to us, right? Is to affect and to hold the mirror up to nature.
Very well put. The first words of the play, who's there?
Yeah.
The play is a kind of Rorschach test. And in responding to it, we discover who we are. Both we are as individuals, but also as a society. Do we force our young people to become something as corrupt as the society that surrounds them? And what does it take to get through this world with some goodness and goodness for others?
Yeah, and that's why, sorry. That's why I'd always felt strongly for me that Hamlet is not the man who is always on the brink of suicide. If only this too solid flesh could melt. But in the end, that's not an option for him, because he is actually the embodiment of life, of a life force and love. That's the brilliance of Shakespeare. He counters that with an inevitability of death. And so therein lies the great tragedy,
Well, this great tragedy, Hamlet, is so central to all of our thoughts and who we are. And tonight we're going to get to see, Jonathan, your performance from 2015. One day soon, Amaka, we will get to see your performance as Hamlet as well. Hamlet's past, Hamlet's future, but always Hamlet present, at least tonight. Thank you both.
Thank you, Antoni and Jonathan. This was such a pleasure. I'm so glad to be able to have this conversation with you. Thanks for letting me crash the party.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm glad. I wouldn't want to do Hamlet's a solo version when you're playing it, so it's nice to have another Hamlet.
Yeah, we need more time.
Well, here we go. Let's enjoy Hamlet's in company tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the Stratford Festival 2015 production of Hamlet. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to tonight's film. My name is Antoni Cimolino. I'm the artistic director of the Stratford Festival. And after a week of hiatus, as a mark of respect for the victims of racism and those who work peacefully for change, we resume our viewing parties for the Stratford Festival on Film series. And tonight, we're presenting my 2015 production of Hamlet. Now, of all of Shakespeare's plays, this is the most quoted. It's also the most debated drama in world history. It's been puzzled over and argued about by academics and people in the theater now for hundreds of years. We can never hope to pluck out the heart of its mystery. It's too great of a play for that. But it doesn't mean we won't stop trying. Now, given that Hamlet is such fertile ground for discussion, you won't want to miss the rest of the online content that we've prepared for you. In our In Conversation series, playwright Donna Michelle St. Bernard will be interviewing Amaka Umeh, who was to play Hamlet in our 2020 season before the pandemic hit. Now, our first female Hamlet, our first Hamlet of color, Amaka was going to be sensational in the role, which I hope she will be when you do present that production in the time ahead. If you were watching the pre-show just now, you've already met Amaka, as she was chatting with me and with the Hamlet of tonight's film, the wonderful Jonathan Goad, as we talked about the play. Also available is our Creative Concepts series, in which I'm interviewed, but more importantly, so is our composer for tonight's film, Stephen Page, the wonderful musician and composer, as well as the longtime frontman for the beloved Canadian band, Bare Naked Ladies. Don't miss that. And then, of course, we'll have our virtual Meet the Festival this coming Saturday at 10 a.m., in which you'll get a chance to ask questions of the cast, also not to be missed. And there's one more very special event that no fan of the Stratford Festival will want to miss. Today, June 11th, would have been the 100th anniversary of our founder, Tom Patterson. Now, we had planned to celebrate that in the new theater that we had created with his name, but that was not to be. Instead, we're going to have our celebration online as Tom's friend, Lois Burdett, the legendary Stratford school teacher and author of the renowned children's series, Shakespeare Can Be Fun, presents a tribute appropriately titled To Tom Patterson with Love. It's available for viewing throughout the series. Meanwhile, don't forget about our brand new film, William Shakespeare's The Merry Wives of Windsor, which is available not as part of this free series, but is available instead for purchase or for rent exclusively on the Cineplex store. Now on to tonight's film. Remember, if you have any problems with the film, you can usually resolve them simply by refreshing your screen or adjusting the resolution. For details, see Film Festival FAQs at the bottom of our homepage at stratfordfestival.ca. And for answers to life's deeper mysteries, well, you'll just have to make up your own mind as we watch William Shakespeare's Hamlet.